Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Viva Connections and SharePoint Framework bi-weekly sync. My name is Hugo, and I will be your host for the call today. We have an action-packed agenda today. We have the latest updates on the SharePoint Framework. We're going to be showing some community project updates. We're going to have picture time where optionally you can share your camera and we can show people, the awesome community that we have. And then we have two demos, one by Aimery, who's going to show using Microsoft Graph API to create a web part report. And the other one is by me, but it's a web part that was written by João Mendes, which is the SPFx web part, my dashboard. We have tons of resources for you. The first thing is if you want to watch videos and you want to learn, you have access to the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform community videos. So all the calls that we do, all the demos that we do are available on our YouTube channel. You can subscribe if you don't want to miss out on anything. We also have our LinkedIn groups for discussions. So this is a great place to keep active with the community and have great positive conversations. We also have many, many open source initiatives where you can use resources, but also contribute to these resources. These are open source and they're open to everybody. We have sample galleries. If you got some cool stuff that you want to share, you can absolutely share in the sample galleries. And there's great ways to learn how to use the various technologies that we talk about. And we have more and more. You can go to aka.ms/community/home to get access to all these cool things, all in one link. Our Microsoft 365 and Power Platform community calls are as follows. We have the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform, which is on summer break right now, and we'll be back on August 22nd. We have the Power Platform monthly call, where we actually share all the latest with the Power Platform, and we celebrate the work of others in the community that show us how they've used the Power Platform in really cool and creative solutions. And we got the Office add-in and the Viva Connections and SharePoint Framework call, and that's the call we're on today. You can get to all these invites by going to aka.ms/community/calls. And the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform, which is on break until the August 22nd. Again, we love everyone, but hey, we need to recharge this this summer. So we'll see you in August. Now, if you'd like to present on our mini community calls, you're welcome. Everyone is encouraged and welcome to present on the community calls. All you need to do is to go to aka.ms/community/request/demo. And to talk about what you can do if you're interested in presenting or contributing to the community, we have an initiative. And David can talk about that. David?
I can. Thank you, Hugo. So, friends, we all know and love sharing is caring, and it's finally back. We have constructed a new way, in fact, for you to register for these sessions. And what are these sessions? These sessions are live hands-on guidance sessions, which means that we're going to get together in a Teams call and we're going to figure some stuff out. For example, maybe you don't know what GitHub is or what a pull request is. You want to contribute, but you're not sure where to get started. You got these awesome samples and you don't know how to submit them. We're going to work through it together. These sessions are free. They are safe space, which means they are not recorded, and we have started setting them up using the new Teams webinar feature. So it's super easy to get registered. You sign up, you immediately get an invite. It all works just fantastically. So go check out aka.ms/sharingiscaring. We've got more coming soon. We're going to start creating videos for some of these so they can be on demand. Big plans, big ideas. We want to help you do more in the community. Wow, choking on my own words. All right. Now, once you do contribute to the community, we want to recognize all the amazing work that you're doing, and that's where our recognition program comes in. This is not going away. This is a Credly powered initiative, meaning that you will get those accredited and official badges for all the amazing work that you're doing. We just upped our subscription with them to do even more. So we are excited for what the rest of 2023 brings in 2024. And for those that have been waiting for their badges, we're going to process them. There was an error in the Credly system. actually more on the Twitter side. When you try to share your badge on Twitter, shocker, I know, but it's working again. And so now we're going to see all those badges coming out, and you can share them on Twitter, share them on LinkedIn, print them out, put them on the fridge, send them to mom, send them in your cards at the end of the year. You're good to go. So we do need you to opt in, ak.ms/community/recognition. And it's easy. We use MailChimp to keep track of all that. All right. All those chimps are doing all the work for us. Hugo, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm not sure how to follow a chimp impersonation from David.
Oh, that was a real chimp.
Right.
I pay him to stay here with me.
Oh, that's why it was so accurate.
That's right.
All right. So let's talk about the SharePoint framework. So here's the latest from the Microsoft engineering for Microsoft Viva, Microsoft Teams, and SharePoint extensibility. And to talk about that, I believe we have our friend Alex. Alex?
Yep. Thank you. So currently we have SharePoint Framework 1.18 in preview. It's beta 1. We are working on the next beta as well, and hopefully to release somewhere in August or September. And next slide, please. So here are the examples of what we are doing for SPFx 1.18. So we are mostly focusing on adaptive cart extensions and new capabilities in there, and especially new components. So we are allowing text inputs in the cards and the whole new search card template. So this is basically what we are working on for this release. Next slide, please. Standard slide. Steady growth, best community in the world. Everything is because of you, and that's why SPFx is so popular, and we are still growing. That's nice. Next slide. And the roadmap, so current latest GA release in what is 1.17.4. This is the production ready. As mentioned, 1.18 is beta 1 right now. Main features are around ACES, but we also updated the Fluent UI to be V8 by default in the all new projects. And as mentioned, GA is planned to be somewhere in August or September. And I believe that's it from the slides, right?
That's it. Thank you, Alex.
Awesome.
And now let's talk about the various open source projects that we have at our disposal. And the first open source project we have is the PnPjs library.
Yes,
and I believe
we do.
Julie, yep.
I am here. Not much has changed since 2 weeks ago when we presented this. We're still on track. Version 3.17 is to be released on July 17th. Just a heads up for those who follow this library religiously, we are moving our release date from Friday, the second Friday to the third Monday. So just 2 days out around to the Mondays, because that works better now that we have 3 people on the team. Bo Cameron joined us several months ago, and this just works better for the team. So we're going to release on Mondays. We have some bug fixes for batching that had very specific batching scenarios that had an incorrect header. We're going to be addressing a OneDrive analytics changes in the graph library. There's a bug fix for a graph content type, add copy from content type hub. If you have not used that endpoint, that is a very useful one for reusing content types in your SharePoint sites from the content type hub. That is better than copying them for various reasons for backend stuff. And obviously some various documentation updates. We're always trying to do that. Also, version 4 is underway now. If you check out issue number 2678, that's pinned to the top of our GitHub repo. It links to the project planning board. If you have any feedback for us, certainly add it to that issue. As always, we're doing the nightly build, so if any updates get merged in, you can test it out with the @v3 nightly build. Follow us on M365 PnPjs on Twitter or LinkedIn, the M365 platform community, PnP community. Check that out on LinkedIn. I think as that platform sort of has taken off with the trials and tribulations of Twitter. So that is all I have for today. Back to you, Hugo.
Tried to say that 3 times fast. All right, and now to talk about the CLI for Microsoft 365, let's pass it to Garry.
Hey Hugo, thank you. Yes, so CLI for Microsoft 365 version 6.10 beta has been released. So not as many kind of new commands, well, no new commands, but lots of updates. So one notable bug that we fixed. So this was an issue creating service principals using our Azure AD commands. But as Alex already mentioned as well, with the new beta version of SharePoint Framework, we've upgraded Project Upgrade, Project Doctor, and Doctor commands to now support that new release. We're also working heavily behind the scenes to update a lot of the code base as well. So you'll see lots of changes that we're moving from thens to async await. So if you are a contributor, you may have already seen this already, but we're in this kind of transition state, and a few minor command updates as well, which you can see in the release notes. The release notes you can see at aka.ms/CLI-M365/notes. But if you want to try this beta out, you can get that from npm and Docker by using the next tags. And if you haven't done so already, best place to talk about CLI for Microsoft 365 is joining our Discord server, and you can get the join link by going to aka.ms/CLI-M365/Discord. You can also follow us on Twitter for those of you who are still on the platform at CLI Microsoft 365. Next slide. So Microsoft 365 Developer Proxy, we actually do have a beta release. So we were going to just release it at the end of the month, but actually these updates, fantastic feedback from James Love, who has been clearly testing the proxy. Highlighted a few issues, but we also added support as well for new features. So that new feature was we've extended the minimal permissions plugin with support for batching. So this is the plugin which will track your requests going for your app and return, hey, here's the minimal amount of permissions that you need from Microsoft Graph to actually use them as well. Yeah, little improvements about excluding dollar value from the select guidance where it was showing up incorrectly, and issues when generating the summaries when you were retrieving minimal permissions as well if you didn't call the graph. So again, thanks for the feedback. If you want to go and try out this beta release, go to aka.ms/M365/proxy and go to the releases tab. On there, you'll see the pre-release download for Windows, for Linux, for Mac OS. And yeah, we're working heavily to make sure that we've got our new release version 0.10 ready for the end of the month. Hugo, back to you.
Thank you. And for those of you who are thinking, gee, I wish that we had more time with Alex, here's Alex to talk about the reusable SPFx controls.
Thank you, Hugo. And yeah, so shame on us. We released our latest versions back in April, but we are working hard to release the next version either maybe tomorrow or next week with a lot of new stuff coming there. And sorry about not really fast releases, but we are still looking for the right cadence based on our possibilities and amount of issues, PRs, etc., etc. So if you contribute more to our components, we will release more. So please, 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 we are ready for new contributors and new contributions. Back to you, Hugo.
Thank you. And the reusable SPFx controls is definitely a fantastic initiative. I urge you to go look at it if you haven't used it yet. All right, let's talk about our Viva Connections Toolkit for Visual Studio Code. We have a new minor release, version 1.1, and we have a roadmap for version 2, where we're going to have code snippets for SPFX solutions. We're going to generate the CI/CD pipeline for SPFX projects using the CLI for Microsoft 365 GitHub Actions. And then we'll have things like actions that will allow to rename a project, which is super awesome. Instead of having to use the CLI, you'll be able to do that directly with Viva Connections Toolkit. You'll be able to deploy the solutions to the site using the app catalog and extending the environment details view, as well as granting project permissions. So you can install the Viva Connections Toolkit from Visual Studio Code for Visual Studio Code from the Visual Studio Code Marketplace or directly from the VS Code extensions tab. You can get to the location at ak.ms/viva/VS Code. And I'd like to thank also Adam for noticing that we didn't have the Viva Connections Toolkit on our PnP homepage. And so we've added it, so you can find it from there as well. We also have the PnP Modern Search, which can be found at ak.ms/pnp-search. And it's a bunch of web parts that you can use to build a modern search experience using flexible web parts. And you can configure them to do many, many cool things. I encourage you to go take a look at that. We're currently at version 4.9. And we are adding some new things. For example, preventing the clickjack security fix, or ensuring the clickjack security fix, I guess is what I should say. And we've added a few scenarios as well. Now we have a repository. In fact, we have multiple repositories where you can contribute to SharePoint framework samples. We have SPFx extensions and SPFx web parts, and these are the updates over the last 2 weeks. We have 2 new extensions. One is a sticky feedback by Sandeep PS. And so it actually has the cool feedback button and in the bottom lower right corner, and it pops up a dialog box on every page so you can connect feedback. There's also an update, a new extension by Martin, which is a dynamic site form, and he adds the ability to add dynamic fields, for example, location fields and things like that. It's a form extension as well. We also have a tenant-wide extension manager by Dan Toft. It's amazing. I wish that was built into the product, but it's a great web part that allows you to manage your extensions. And Dan actually had noticed that Vesta was having a problem using extensions in one of the community calls, so he decided to do something about it. Thank you, Dan. And Aimery has actually created an update for the web part report web part. Tried to say that easily. And so what we've done is we've actually done some general improvements on the web part, including top action icons. That's a new feature that's been introduced a few releases ago, but a little button on the upper right corner of your web part to do some cool things. We've added some basic list features such as search and pagination, and we've improved the code in general. Now, we also have adaptive card extensions, and to talk about those samples, let's pass it back to David.
Thank you, Hugo. Not a lot of action here, friends, but plenty of room for action. So if you would like to submit a sample, please do so. Myself and Derek Cash Peterson work together on handling this, so please definitely submit some samples. And that's back to you, Hugo.
Awesome. David, if only there was a way for us to, show people that we're an awesome community. Do you have any suggestions?
Maybe we could use together mode. So why doesn't everybody turn on their camera? And I will take on over the screen there. Unless I don't think did you have a Camtasia ready? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Got it all ready to go here. All right. Go ahead and turn on those cameras. Everybody still got some more seats ready to go. Now, while we're waiting for everyone to completely show up, at the end of this, Teams has a weird issue where it leaves together mode on for everybody if one of the hosts turns it on, so you'll have to manually turn it off yourself when that happens. So, all right, well, let's give it, right now, for whatever reason it does that. All right, let's give a wave to the community. Everybody still can pop in if there's room. Feel free, there are some seats, but let's give a wave. Stephanie is looking very stoic. I think her camera may have frozen, but she looked great.
That's a great picture.
That's right. She's like, I'm smiling to the world. All right. Excellent. Thanks, everybody. Hugo, feel free to take on back over.
Awesome. Thank you. I will then. Okay, so now it's time for our demos. And the first demo is by Aimery, who's going to talk about using Microsoft Graph API to create a web part report. Aimery, the floor is yours. Or should I see the screen?
Thank you, Hugo. I'm gonna share my screen. Here. Okay, let me know when you can see my screen.
We can see it. We can hear you. Go ahead.
Perfect. So hello everyone. My name is Aimery Thomas. I'm a Microsoft 365 developer at Avanade. You can reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn. As you can see, I've been contributing to this great community for some time now. And this is my second demo on this call. And today I'm going to talk to you about the web part report, web part. So what does it do? This web part displays a report of all web parts used in a SharePoint site using either a list or a chart. Why did I build this web part and why it could be interesting for you to use it? Well, because you can get a quick view of all web parts used in a SharePoint site. And you can also easily identify the use of custom web parts. To do that, it uses the Microsoft Graph API with the Pages and Web Parts endpoint, the MS Graph client, and some PnP React controls to display the data. And now let's switch to a quick demo of the web part. Okay, so here you have the web part report. So with the list of all the web parts used in this particular SharePoint site. So for each web part, you have the web part type, the web part ID, and the title of the page where the web part is used. You also have the site ID. So here it's always the same, but if someday we add a new feature to this application to get web parts from other sites, then the site ID could be useful. You can use the search bar. For example, here, if I search for PnP, here I know that on this site, some PnP modern search web parts are being used. And now let's say that I want to switch to a chart view to have a more, let's say, graphical view of my web parts. So to do that, I'm going to click on Edit to edit page. And here, sorry. Instead of clicking here to edit the web part and display the property pane of the web part, I'm going to click here on this drop-down to select the chart option. And then here, I have my my chart view. I'm going to click on Republish here. So the chart view displays the web part in a more, let's say, aggregated way. So for example, here, I don't have the list of every single web part, but I can see easily that on my site, I have 4 events web parts. So now let's go back to the slide to see some code. So the first thing that I want to do when I'm loading my application, my web part, is to get all the web parts on my site. So to do that, first I need to get all the pages that I have on my site. So with the pages endpoint of the Graph API, and I only need the ID and the title. Once I've done that, for all the pages that I got, I'm going to get the web part on this page. So I'm using the page ID for each page and the web parts endpoint to get the web parts. And once I have all the web parts, I can display it using first the list view control, which is really easy to use. Now, if I want to hide my list view control to display the chart view, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use top actions. And to do that, I'm going to implement the get top action configuration function. I want to use a drop-down top action with a list option for the list view and a chart option for the chart view. And what's going to happen is when I click on the chart option, it's going to update the display option property so that the list view will be hidden and the chart view will be displayed. And the chart view is using another great PnP React control, the chart control. So the chart control was a bit more tricky to use because, as I said earlier, it displays the web parts in a more aggregated way. So I had to reorganize a bit my data because, as you can see here, it requires labels, which is an array of strings, and data, which is an array of numbers. So to do that, here, I've used a map data model to have for each web part title, which are my strings, a dedicated number, which represents the number of web parts I have on the SharePoint site. For example, here, I have two text web parts on my site. And once I have the data like that, I can easily build my array of numbers and array of strings to use in the chart control. So the last thing I wanted to talk to you about is not directly linked to the web part itself, but it's the Microsoft 365 developer proxy that I've used for the development of the web part and that I'm using right now for the demo. Because one of the features of the proxy is to be able to mock API responses. For example, here, if I try to get pages for this specific site, which is my demo site, it will return this set of pages instead of the real pages that I have on my site. And I can do the same for the web parts, meaning that for each page, I've created a set of web parts to return. So instead of creating many pages and for each page adding many web parts, I just have to create all the data in a JSON file and then launching the proxy. And it turned out that the proxy was even more useful to me because the page Microsoft Graph API is being updated right now. So if I launch the web part without using the proxy and mocking responses, I might have some errors, and the web part might not work properly. So I'm not very lucky because I've developed the web part a few weeks ago, but just before the demo, the updates are rolling out. So anyway. That's it for me. Thank you very much. I hope it was interesting. Let me know in the chat if you have any question. And back to you, Hugo.
Thank you. That was a fantastic sample. And I have to say, I kind of feel bad now because I'm about to demo a web part, and I wish I was using the proxy, but I did screenshots like a chump. So thank you for the cool sample, and let me share the screen. All right, so hopefully everyone can see. Today I'm going to be talking about my dashboard web part. And I guess I shouldn't call it my dashboard web part because it's really João's web part. So it's João's dashboard web part. It was written by João. João always prefers that and likes for us to demo his contributions for him. So I have the honor to be showing the work that João has been doing. The web part that I'm talking about today, here is the link for the web part. You will be able to find it on the SPFx web part sample repository after this call, but it's called My Dashboard. And it actually aggregates things like your files, your feeds, your people, and it is actually quite fantastic. Now, like every web part, every sample that João does, João always spends the time to make sure that the sample looks really professional and looks complete. If you don't know that it's not an out-of-the-box web part, sometimes it can be very hard to tell them apart from the web parts that Microsoft has built. And that's a great approach. When you build your own web parts, it's always a good idea to make sure that your web part fits in and looks professional. It really does help people adopt and trust your web part a lot more. In fact, there's a user experience principle called the aesthetic usability principle that makes people believe that the prettier something is, the prettier a user interface is, the more usable they will believe it is. So here's an example here of the web part as it is running in my environment. Where I have, for example, my agenda, my to-dos. I don't have any to-dos. Great, I don't have anything to do. You can also look at your files. So it shows folders and files as a separate different entities, and you can obviously open each one of them. But you can also look at the ones that you recently used, as well as the ones that you recently shared. Now, I haven't shared anything because this is my demo environment, but this is where these things would go. You also have the feeds. So for example, the company announcements and all the news can actually be found in there, as well as the people. So you have the relevant people here. Those are all sample fictitious people. But this is a great way to give you access to all the people that you need to have access to. And you can see here right away, it uses all the built-in capabilities, for example, the hover effects and things like that. It's a great web part, and the style that João chose to use and the information he chose to use is very cool. But how the web part was built is probably something that's even more important, because you can make this dashboard what you need it to be. And let me show you some examples here. First of all, the web part works differently if it's running in SharePoint. It supports dark themes. It's designed to work in Teams and Teams and dark theme as well, obviously. And again, you'll see how the code is designed to do this, but it also works great or well in a mobile device where it's actually just adding some different sections for each kind of tab that we would see here. So it makes it's not a reduced experience, it's actually a best experience for each platform, or for each profile, if you will. Now the code is probably why we're here. So the code here, actually what João does here, he uses a very interesting structure. And if you're just getting started with creating SPFx extensions or SPFx web parts, this might be something that might inspire you, but he's actually really made it easy to understand what each part does. So let's zoom in a little bit. And the first thing that that we have is the atoms. And atoms, if you're not familiar with atoms, this is something that is used to basically by Jotai, and Jotai is a state management library that makes it super easy for you to manage state. Here, I'll put the link here to Jotai. With jotai.org, it's a great library, and state management is something that allows you to actually store information, for example, settings or information you've retrieved. And what you can do is you can help control how you repaint your screen based on when the state changes. And so the cool thing about that is that you don't have to worry about, okay, which component do I have to update? The state controls which items get re-rendered, and Jotai is great at making sure that you don't re-render the screen unnecessarily, which makes the web part or any solution you use using Jotai feel a lot more performant. So the app state atom that João uses, he just keeps track of all the state information, like the themes and things like that. The next folder that he's got is the components. And you'll notice here that he's really, any element that you may have noticed in the screen itself, they're actually created into individual components. And the components are very descriptive, so you know exactly what each component does. So for example, here the dashboard control is the one that renders the actual dashboard, and we'll actually dig deeper into that. But you can also see I got the center, the header, the left, so it gives you a great idea of how this information is rendered. So it makes it easy for you. If you said, hey, I would really prefer to have, the agenda on the right side, it's pretty easy for you to figure out how to make these changes. We also have the constants. And the constants, we have a tendency as developers sometimes to hide the constants somewhere. But what João does is he creates a folder for constants, and all the constants are stored in one place. It's a great way if there's anything that's hard-coded, like heights or theme rules and things like that, or types of people, as he's using here, he's able to do that. So again, you can find the majority of the constants in a single place. In the sample, we also use React hooks. So React hooks are a more contemporary way to, if I could say that, it's a more contemporary way to use React by actually simplifying how we use things, like for example, image utilities, PnPjs, and other utilities. And for example, here, João has some code on how to use the local storage, right? So the local storage is when you want to set information in the user's browser temporarily, so you don't have to refresh that or re-obtain that information every single time. You're able to use the local storage, and it's usually a few lines of code to use local storage, but by using a React hook called use local storage, João was able to actually make use of the local storage without having complicated code throughout his web part. Same thing with using PnPjs. PnPjs, as we've seen before, is an awesome library that makes it easy for you to retrieve, I would call the APIs, the SharePoint APIs. And by using use PnPjs, João has wrapped basically all the calls for PnPjs in a single function, and it's really cool. The models is how we actually describe the data that we're going to be retrieving. And so João, again, has combined all the models into a single area. It's easy here to see all the types of things that he's capturing, for example, file information and things like that. We also have the PnPjs configuration, and we have some utilities. And the utilities here, I would actually download this web part just for these utilities here. There's actually a shim to handle changes to the themes from version 8 to version 9. And so to actually make themes a lot easier and a lot cleaner in your web parts. Definitely, this should be moved into a separate library by itself. And then finally, we have the dashboard web part itself. And the dashboard web part obviously is rendered by the dashboard web part class, but the main component of the dashboard is really this dashboard TypeScript file here. Let's look at the code. Because the one thing that we are now able to do by breaking down the information or the components cleanly like this, we're able to write really clean code. So for example, here, what João does when he renders the dashboard control itself, he's using the Fluent provider to actually capture the theme and to set the theme information so that he doesn't have to worry too much about what color to render things. It's actually built in as part of the Fluent theme provider. And then all he has to do is really call within the provider his dashboard control and pass the information about what he wants to do in the dashboard and all the properties. Now, another thing that I wanted to point out, because not everyone, some people are just getting started using React, is he's got this weird thing here where he's using open angle bracket and a closed angle bracket. And that's because when you render elements, HTML elements in React, it always needs to have a single parent element. You can't return a whole bunch of elements. You need to return a single parent element. And so, well, there's workarounds for that. But what João and what most people would normally do, is that we would say, well, I'm going to create a div, and I'm going to put all the stuff that I need to render inside that div. But the problem with creating an extra div every time you have a component is you're creating just random padding and random elements that don't really need to be there. So what it's a good trick to use here is use this kind of this empty element that's not going to introduce any random HTML elements. React will understand that basically all the children of that empty element are going to be rendered. So cool trick here. Okay, and then if we look at the dashboard control itself, that's the thing that gets called. You'll notice again, it's very easy to understand. I got my left section, which shows my day. I got my center section, and I got my right section, which shows my list of people. Now, I'm not going to go into every single component, but I want to show how every component is built the same way. So for example, if I look at my day here, let's click into my day. I have an element that actually returns tabs. And for each tab, it says either I have the Microsoft Graph Toolkit agenda and the Microsoft Graph Toolkit to do. Now you may say, what's the Microsoft Graph Toolkit? Well, the Microsoft Graph Toolkit is actually a great, well, I guess they're the web elements that you can embed in your solution to make calls to the graph a lot easier. And it's not just making the calls to the graph. It actually also allows you to authenticate, to actually render the data you've received in a nice, clean way and in a consistent way. And again, making components that look professional are going to help. Syntactic sugar, I like that. So here's an example. Let's actually dig into this component here, which is one of the components we're using, the agenda component. So that's, the one thing that you can see in the Graph Toolkit, by the way, is that you always have the ability to open the samples directly in a sandbox. So let's go into the sandbox. And here's the agenda component. Now the sandbox is cool because it actually has two components. It's got kind of the preview window, and it's got the code window. And let's again take a look at this is what we are rendering with these two lines of code right here. We got two components. One of them is the login component, which makes sure that we are authenticating the people, obviously, that are using the component. And the second part is basically rendering the agenda. And in doing that, actually renders the agenda in a clean way. Now, there's lots more components in the Microsoft Graph Toolkit, not just the agenda. You can see here, I do have the agenda that we are using for this sample. But the one thing that you should also know is every component has kind of different ways to call them. And I'm not going to spend too much time into digging into every single component and every single configuration because we'd be here for hours and hours. But it's important to see that there's lots of different samples and lots of different templates that are available. And you also have the ability to overwrite the template for your component. So for example, here, this is kind of a, if you see on the screen here, I'm actually using a different template to render the default data, the loading data, and when there's no data to show. Well, guess what? That's actually what we use in João's web part. Now, the other component is the to-do component. We're not going to dig into the to-do component too much, but again, same idea. There's different ways to call the to-do component. So now, if we go back to the code, you'll see that João actually uses for example, in the My Agenda or the MTG agenda, he's actually using the agenda component from the Microsoft Graph Toolkit React. And then he's actually simply calling the agenda where he's actually specifying here how many days that we want to show. And he specifies the class, but then he's got different templates for how to render the loading code, how to render the default element when we actually have data that's been retrieved, and how to render what to do when there's no data. And that's the one that you saw, I think, on my screen. So it's very cool, right? And all of that is actually controlling the agenda component, which is, again, on the web part right here. So the very similar approaches for all the other components, the to-do, the my file, the feed, the people. Some of them he's actually retrieving the data directly using PnPjs and rendering, doing custom rendering. But those are all great ways. If you're learning how to get started using the PnPjs, the Microsoft Graph Toolkit, it's definitely a great example here. Again, because it works in all the scenarios that you might be looking for within Teams, within SPFx. I strongly recommend you go take a look at it. All right, so that's João's dashboard web part, and you can find it after this call at the SPFx web part sample repository. All right. Thank you, everyone. We had demo from Aimery today using the Microsoft Graph API to create a web part report. Web part, I guess. I don't know. And then we had João's sample using the my dashboard. If you have any feedback on these calls, we'd love to hear your feedback. Rate the call, rate the content, let us know how we can improve. You can go to aka.ms/community/calls/feedback. And we also have an official Discord server. So if you want to connect, learn, collaborate, you want to share some thoughts you have, ask questions, and stay up to date, you can go to aka.ms/community/discord. And we have a handy dandy QR code right here. And that's it for us for today. Thank you for attending. The recording will be available in 24 hours on our Microsoft 365 and Power Platform Community YouTube channel. And go subscribe. Go to aka.ms/community/video. And you can follow us on Twitter at Microsoft 365 Dev and at Microsoft PnP. Our next Viva Connection and SPFx call is going to be on July 27th at 7 a.m. Pacific time. And our next Microsoft 365 and Power Platform call is going to be on July 20th. It's already the end of July. That's amazing. And with that, thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Woo!
Woo-hoo.